The asteroid field stretched out like a graveyard of broken rocks and forgotten dreams. Daniel Perry guided his old cargo ship through the debris with careful hands. He had been flying these routes for 12 years, and he knew every danger that waited in the darkness between stars. His ship was called the Morning Star. It was not a beautiful vessel. The hull had patches on patches, and the engine made sounds that worried him every day. But it flew and it kept him alive, and that was enough for a man like Daniel. He was heading toward an abandoned mining station on the edge of space. The station had been empty for 20 years, but there were still fuel cells inside. Fuel cells that Daniel could salvage and sell at the next port. It was not glamorous work, but it paid for food and repairs and the occasional bottle of whiskey. Daniel was 43 years old. He had gray in his hair and lines on his face from too many years of staring at star maps. He had no family waiting for him anywhere. No wife. No children. Just the ship and the endless black void and the next job waiting at the next station. The mining outpost appeared on his sensors. It was a small structure built into the side of a massive asteroid. The lights were dead and the docking ports were covered in space dust. Daniel brought his ship in slowly and connected to the main airlock. He put on his suit and grabbed his tool bag and stepped into the station. The air inside was stale but breathable. His flashlight cut through the darkness as he walked down the empty corridors. Then he heard something, a sound that did not belong in an abandoned station, a faint tapping, metal against metal, coming from the eastern docking bay. Daniel followed the sound. His heart beat faster as he moved through the shadows. He did not carry a weapon. He had never needed one before. The eastern docking bay held a small shuttle. It was not a human design. The curves were too smooth, and the metal had a blue tint that Daniel recognized immediately. This was a vessel. They were a proud species who lived in the systems beyond human space. They were tall and slender with pale blue skin, and eyes that seemed to look through you rather than at you. They rarely spoke to humans. They considered humanity too young and too emotional to be worth their attention. Daniel approached the shuttle carefully. The tapping sound was coming from inside. He found the emergency release and opened the hatch. Inside he found a female. She was young by their standards, perhaps the equivalent of 30 human years. She was sitting in the pilot seat and her hand was tapping against the console in a steady rhythm. Her eyes were closed and her breathing was shallow. The shuttle's systems were dead. The life support had failed and the temperature inside was dropping fast. She had maybe 2 hours left before the cold took her. Daniel did not hesitate. He lifted her from the seat and carried her back to his ship. She was lighter than he expected. Her skin was cool against his hands. He placed her in his small medical bay and wrapped her in thermal blankets. He adjusted the temperature controls to match what he knew about biology. He had picked up bits of knowledge over the years from ports and traders and late-night conversations in station bars. She woke up 6 hours later. Her eyes opened and she stared at Daniel with confusion and something that might have been fear. Daniel held up his hands to show he meant no harm. He spoke slowly and clearly. "I found you in the station. Your shuttle lost power. You are safe now." The female sat up slowly. She looked around the small cabin with those deep blue eyes. She did not speak for a long moment. "Why did you help me?" Her voice was soft and musical like wind through crystal chimes. She spoke human standard language, but with an accent that made each word sound like a question. Daniel shrugged. "You needed help, I was here," seemed like the right thing to do. She studied him like he was a puzzle she could not solve. They were known for their logic. Everything they did had a reason and a purpose. They did not understand actions that brought no benefit. "I have nothing to offer you. My shuttle is damaged beyond repair. I cannot pay you." "I did not ask for payment." "Then why? What do you gain from this?" Daniel smiled a little. He walked to the small kitchen area and poured 2 cups of water. He handed one to her. I gain nothing, but you get to live. That seems like enough to me." The female took the water and drank slowly. Her hands were shaking slightly from the cold she had endured. "My name is I am an engineer from the third colony of Prime. I was conducting a survey of this sector when my systems failed." "Daniel Perry, cargo hauler, nice to meet you." Over the next 2 days, Daniel worked on her shuttle. He stripped parts from his own ship to repair her damaged systems. He gave her food from his supplies even though he had little to spare. He shared his oxygen and his warmth and his time without complaint. A watched him work. She asked questions about humans and their strange ways. She could not understand why he would sacrifice his own resources for a stranger. On the morning of the third day, her shuttle was ready to fly. Daniel had managed to restore the main systems and patch the hull. It was not perfect, but it would get her home. Stood at the airlock between their ships. She looked at Daniel with something new in her eyes, something that her people did not often feel. "I do not know how to thank you, Daniel Perry. Among my people we believe that every action must have balance. You have given me my life. I do not know how to repay such a debt." Daniel just smiled. "There is no debt. You go home safe. That is enough for me." Nodded slowly. She reached out and touched his hand. It was a gesture of deep respect among her people. "I will not forget this. I will not forget you." Then she turned and walked into her shuttle. The engines fired, and she flew away into the darkness between the stars. Daniel watched her go. Then he turned back to his ship and began calculating how far he could fly on his remaining fuel. He had given her most of his reserves. It would be a hard journey to the next port. But he did not regret it, not for a single moment. He did not know that his simple act of kindness had just changed the fate of 2 civilizations. He did not know that it would carry his memory with her for years to come. He did not know that one day she would stand before the most powerful leaders of her people and tell them the story of the human who helped her without asking for anything in return. Daniel Perry was just a cargo hauler doing what seemed right, and sometimes that is how history begins. 3 years had passed since that day on the abandoned mining station. 3 years since I had looked into the eyes of a human and seen something she did not expect. Kindness without purpose, sacrifice without reward. She had returned to her and resumed her work as an engineer, but she was not the same. Something had shifted inside her. She began to study humans with a curiosity that her colleagues found strange. She read their history. She watched their broadcasts. She learned about their wars and their art and their endless capacity for both destruction and creation. She discovered that Daniel Perry was not unusual among his kind. Humans helped each other all the time. They helped strangers and enemies and even creatures that could never repay them. It made no logical sense, and yet it was beautiful. Her studies brought her to the attention of the High Council. They needed someone who understood humans, someone who could advise them on dealings with this unpredictable species. Was appointed as a senior advisor and given a seat at the great table where the fate of the Confederation was decided. Now she sat in that chamber and listened to news that made her blood run cold. "They are moving." High Counselor spoke with grave authority. His voice echoed through the vast hall where 50 council members sat in curved rows. "They have assembled a fleet of 200 warships. Their target is human space." A murmur ran through the assembly. They were feared throughout the galaxy. They were a species of conquerors who saw other races as resources to be consumed. They had destroyed 12 civilizations in the past 1,000 years. Their methods were brutal and efficient. They left nothing behind but empty worlds and silence. "The humans cannot stop them." One of the military advisors spoke from his position near the wall. "They have less than 50 combat vessels. Against the Armada they will last perhaps 2 weeks. Then they will fall." Another council member shrugged with cold acceptance. "It is unfortunate, but it is not our concern. They have no quarrel with us." felt her hands tighten on the armrests of her chair. She thought of Daniel Perry and his gentle smile. She thought of all the humans who were about to die because no one would help them. A door opened at the far end of the chamber. A human woman walked in wearing the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. She was Commander Lisa Grant, and she served as the human to the government. Lisa Grant was 38 years old with short brown hair and steady eyes that showed no fear despite facing 50 of the most powerful beings in this sector of space. She walked to the center of the chamber and stood alone before the council. "High Counselor," she bowed her head in respect, "I come before you with a formal request from the United Earth Government. We ask for military assistance against the invasion." The chamber fell silent. Several council members exchanged glances, finally spoke. "Commander Grant, we understand your situation, but the Confederation has no treaty of mutual defense with Earth. We have no obligation to risk our ships and our people for your war." Lisa Grant did not flinch. "I know we have no treaty. I am not asking because of obligation. I am asking because the will not stop with us. Today it is humanity. Tomorrow it could be your colonies. We have a chance to stop them now if we stand together." More silence. The council members seemed unmoved by her words. I saw the hope fading from Lisa Grant's eyes. "They have never threatened space." His voice was not cruel, but it was final. "We see no reason to provoke them by interfering in this conflict. Your request is—" Lisa Grant stood very still. For a moment she looked like she might argue. Then she simply nodded and turned to leave. Her footsteps echoed in the great hall. I stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor and every eye turned to her. "Wait," raised one elegant eyebrow. "Advisora, you wish to speak?" "I do." I stepped down from her seat and walked to the center of the chamber. She stood where Lisa Grant had stood moments before. 3 years ago I was stranded in dead space. My shuttle had failed. I had hours to live. The council members watched her with curiosity. This story was not well known. "A human found me, a cargo pilot named Daniel Perry. He had no reason to help me. He had nothing to gain and much to lose, but he saved my life. He gave me food from his own supplies. He gave me parts from his own ship. He gave me days of his time and asked for nothing in return." She paused and let her words settle over the assembly. "When I asked him why he had helped me, he said that I needed help and he was there. He said it seemed like the right thing to do. That is all. No calculation, no expectation of reward, just simple kindness from a stranger." I turned slowly to address the entire council. "We pride ourselves on our logic. We believe that every action must have purpose and balance, but perhaps we have forgotten something. Perhaps we have forgotten that sometimes the right thing to do is simply the right thing to do. The humans helped one of us. Now they need our help. Do we turn away because there is no profit in saving them?" The chamber was completely silent. Lisa Grant had stopped at the door. She was watching her with tears forming in her eyes. "I am one voice among many." I continued, "but I say we answer the debt that humanity has earned, not because we must, but because it is right." She returned to her seat. The council members began to whisper among themselves. Some looked thoughtful, others looked skeptical. Studied her for a long moment, then he spoke. "The advisor raises an interesting point. We will discuss this matter further before making a final decision. Commander Grant, you may remain as an observer." Lisa Grant nodded and took a seat near the back of the chamber. She caught A's eye and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." I nodded slightly. She did not know if her words would change anything, but she had spoken the truth, and that was all she could do. Somewhere out in the darkness of space, the fleet was moving closer. 200 warships filled with soldiers who knew nothing of mercy or kindness. They did not care about debts or honor or simple acts of compassion. But perhaps those things mattered more than anyone realized. Perhaps they were the only things that truly mattered. The The debate would continue through the night. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and one woman who had been saved by a stranger held the weight of two civilizations in her hands. 14 days. That was all the time humanity had left. The fleet moved through space like a swarm of metal predators, 200 warships carrying thousands of soldiers who had never known defeat. They had already crossed the border into neutral territory. In 14 days, they would reach the first human colony. On the planet called New Hartford, 70,000 people were trying to survive. The colony had been established 40 years ago on a world of green forests and blue oceans. It was a peaceful place where families had built homes and farmers had planted crops and children had grown up believing they were safe. Now evacuation ships filled the sky, but there were not enough of them. There would never be enough of them. Governor Santos stood on the balcony of her office and watched the chaos below. She was 51 years old with silver streaks in her dark hair and a face that had learned to hide fear behind determination. She had been governor for 8 years. She had guided her people through droughts and storms and economic hardships, but nothing had prepared her for this. Admiral Cole walked up beside her. He was the commander of Earth's defense forces in this sector. A tall man with broad shoulders and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. The last evacuation ship leaves in 6 hours. His voice was heavy. We can save maybe 30,000. The rest will have to stay. Santos nodded slowly. And your ships? 43 vessels. Everything we could gather. It will not be enough to stop them, but we can slow them down, buy time for the other colonies to prepare. The admiral paused and looked at her directly. Governor, you should be on one of those evacuation ships. Santos almost laughed. Leave my people behind. Run away while they face death. What kind of leader would I be? A living one. Then I will die as I lived, serving the people who trusted me. Admiral Cole did not argue. He understood duty. He had devoted his entire life to it. I will position my fleet between thee and New Hartford. We will hold as long as we can. If there is any chance of survival, it will come from whatever time we can give you. Santos reached out and took his hand. Thank you for everything. They stood together in silence, watching the evacuation ships rise into the darkening sky. Somewhere out there death was coming, and they would meet it standing. The debate had raged for 2 days without resolution. The council was divided. Half believed that helping humanity was a foolish risk. Half had been moved by A's words and wanted to honor the debt. High Counselor called for silence. The chamber fell quiet as he rose from his seat. We have discussed this matter thoroughly. It is time to make a decision. I will hear final arguments from both sides. An elderly council member named Os stood first. He was known for his caution and his respect for tradition. We have survived for 10,000 years by avoiding unnecessary conflicts. They are not our enemy. If we intervene, we make them our enemy. For what? For a species we barely know. A species that will probably be destroyed regardless of our help. I say we protect our own people and let the humans face their fate. He sat down, to murmurs of agreement from his supporters. A rose next. She had not slept in 2 days. Her voice was hoarse, but her words were clear. Advisor Os speaks of survival. But what is survival without honor? What is existence without principle? We are not animals hiding from predators. We are a civilization that claims to value wisdom and justice. She walked to the center of the chamber. I have studied humans for 3 years. They are flawed in many ways. They are emotional and impulsive and often foolish. But they possess something that we have lost. They have the courage to help others without asking why. They have the heart to sacrifice for strangers. She turned to face High Counselor directly. Among our ancestors, there was a concept called the sacred debt. When someone saves your life, you owe them a debt that transcends logic, a debt that must be paid regardless of cost. Daniel Perry saved my life, By our oldest traditions, I owe him a debt, and I say that debt extends to his entire species. The chamber erupted in whispers, was an ancient concept that had not been invoked in centuries, but it still carried weight. A raised her voice above the noise. If this council refuses to help, I will go alone. I will take my personal vessel and fly to human space and fight beside them. I will probably die, but I will die with my honor intact. Silence fell over the assembly. Every council member stared at her. Then something unexpected happened. A young military commander named Os stood up. He was barely 40 years old and had never spoken in council before. I will go with her. Another council member rose, and I. Then another, and another. Within moments 30 council members were standing, young and old, military and civilian, all willing to follow into battle. High Counselor looked at the standing members. He looked at A. He was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. I have led this council for 60 years. I have always believed that logic should guide our decisions, but perhaps logic is not enough. Perhaps there are moments when the heart must lead. He stood slowly from his great chair. I call for a formal vote. All those in favor of sending our fleet to aid humanity, raise your voice. The chamber filled with sound. It was close, so close, but when the votes were counted, the result was clear. 31 in favor, 19 against. Nodded gravely. The motion carries. The Confederation will send its entire fleet to defend human space. May history judge us kindly. I felt tears forming in her eyes. She had done it. Against all odds, she had convinced her people to answer the debt. She rushed to a communication terminal and entered the codes for Earth's military frequency. A face appeared on the screen. Admiral Cole looked exhausted and surprised. Admiral Cole, my name is I am an advisor to the High Council. I have a message for you and all of humanity. The Admiral leaned forward. We are coming. 300 warships will arrive in 13 days. Tell your people to hold the line. Help is on the way. Admiral Cole stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the smile of a man who had just been given hope when he had none left. I do not know who you are, but thank you from all of us. Smiled back. Thank a cargo pilot named Daniel Perry. He is the reason we are coming. The transmission ended. Turned and walked out of the council chamber. There was a war waiting for her, and a debt to be paid. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel like a storm breaking over calm waters. 200 warships spread across the darkness of space in perfect formation. Their hulls were black and angular, and covered with weapons that had burned civilizations to ash. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched them come. His fleet of 43 ships formed a thin line between the enemy and the planet below. It was like standing in front of an avalanche with nothing but your hands. All ships report ready. His communications officer spoke quietly. Weapons charged, shields at maximum. Cole nodded. He had sent the evacuation ships away 6 hours ago. 30,000 people were fleeing toward the inner colonies. 40,000 remained on New Hartford. They had nowhere to go. He thought about A's message. Help was coming. 13 days, she had said, but we're here now, and 13 days was a lifetime away. All ships. He spoke into the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Cole. We all know what we face today. The odds are not in our favor, but we are the only thing standing between those monsters and our people. Every minute we hold is another minute for evacuation. Every ship we destroy is one less ship to threaten our homes. He paused and looked at the enemy formation on his display. We may not survive this day, but we will make them pay for every inch of space they take. We will show them what humans are made of. Now battle stations. All ships engage. The two fleets rushed toward each other across the void. Weapons fire lit up the darkness like 1,000 angry stars. The battle for New Hartford had begun. Captain Amy commanded the destroyer Steadfast from the left flank of the human formation. She was 34 years old with red hair and green eyes that never flinched from danger. She had joined the Navy at 18 and had worked her way up through talent and determination. "Helm, bring us around to heading 72, she ordered calmly. "Target the lead cruiser. Fire all forward batteries." The Steadfast shuddered as its weapons discharged. Beams of energy crossed the distance and struck the cruiser. The enemy ship's shields flickered but held. "Return fire incoming." The Steadfast rocked violently as enemy weapons found their mark. Alarms screamed across the bridge. A console exploded, sending sparks across the room. "Damage report. Shields down to 60%. Hull breach on deck 4. Casualties reported." Amy gripped her command chair. "Keep firing, do not let up." Across the battlefield, the human fleet was taking heavy losses. They had superior numbers and firepower. Ship after ship fell to their relentless assault. The destroyer Valiant exploded in a ball of fire. The cruiser Defiance was torn apart by concentrated fire from 3 enemy vessels. But the humans did not retreat. They held their line and fought with everything they had. On the planet below, Governor Santos watched the battle from her emergency bunker. The sky above New Hartford flashed with distant explosions. Each flash meant a ship dying. Human, or she could not tell. "How long can they hold?" she asked her aide. The young man checked his display with shaking hands. "At current loss rates, maybe 2 hours, maybe less." Santos closed her eyes. 2 hours. Then they would reach the planet. Then her people would face the same fate as 12 other civilizations before them. She opened her eyes and straightened her back. "Then we prepare our ground defenses. If they want this world, they will have to take it street by street." In space, the battle raged on. Admiral Cole had lost half his fleet. 19 ships remained against more than 150 vessels. The enemy commander had not expected such fierce resistance. But numbers were numbers. Victory was only a matter of time. War leader Vex sat in his command throne and watched the human ships burn. He was massive even by standards, with gray scales and eyes like burning coals. He had conquered 6 worlds and destroyed 3 civilizations. These humans were brave, but bravery meant nothing against superior force. "Signal the human commander," he ordered. "Offer them one chance to surrender. Their courage has earned them that much." The message was transmitted. Admiral Cole received it on his damaged bridge. Half his crew was dead. His ship was barely holding together, but his voice was steady when he replied. "This is Admiral Cole of the Earth Defense Force. We do not surrender. We do not run. You want our world, come and take it." War leader Vex smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Very well. All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship. End this." The fleet began to converge. 100 weapons locked onto Admiral Cole's position. In seconds it would be over. Then the sensors screamed with warnings. "War leader," one of his officers shouted. "New contacts emerging from faster than light. Massive energy signatures, 300 ships." Vex turned to his display. What he saw made his blood run cold. 300 warships dropped out of the void like avenging angels. They formed a wall of silver and blue between the battered human fleet. Their weapons were already charging. A transmission came through. A female voice spoke with cold authority. "Attention fleet. This is advisor of the Confederation. Humanity is under our protection. You have one chance to withdraw. Refuse and we will destroy you." War leader Vex stared at the screen. Here, fighting for humans, it made no sense. There had been no alliance, no treaty, nothing to explain why 300 ships had just appeared to defend a species that was not their own. "This is impossible," he growled. "They have no stake in this conflict." A's voice came again. "You do not understand humans, war leader, and you do not understand us. Now make your choice. Leave or die." Admiral Cole sat in his broken command chair and watched the fleet spread across his display. He thought of the message he had received 13 days ago. Help is coming. Hold the line. They had held against everything. They had held. And help had come. Thank you, he whispered to no one in particular. Thank you. The combined fleet waited. The fleet hesitated. For the first time in their history of conquest, they faced an enemy that outnumbered them. An enemy that had appeared from nowhere to defend a species they had thought alone. War leader Vex made his decision. He was a conqueror, but he was not a fool. All ships retreat. We will find easier prey elsewhere. The fleet began to turn away, but they were too slow. They opened fire. The darkness of space lit up with the fire of 300 warships. They tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. Ship after ship was torn apart by precise, concentrated fire. The humans joined the attack. 19 damaged vessels adding their weapons to the assault. Together, they hunted the retreating fleet. By the time it was over, 160 ships had been destroyed or captured. War leader Vex's flagship was disabled, and he was taken prisoner. The rest of his fleet scattered into the void, never to threaten human space again. The battle for New Hartford was over. Humanity had survived. And somewhere among the fleet, stood on her bridge and smiled. The debt was being paid. The fires had stopped burning. The wreckage of 200 ships drifted through space like fallen leaves after a storm. The battle was over and humanity had won. On the surface of New Hartford, people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They did not understand what had happened. They only knew that death had come for them, and somehow they were still alive. Governor Santos walked through the streets of her capital city. Buildings were damaged from the orbital bombardment that had nearly begun. Windows were shattered and debris littered the roads. But the city still stood. Her people still lived. She made her way to the central plaza where rescue workers were gathering. Medical teams were treating the wounded from the ground defense preparations. Families were reuniting with tears and embraces. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. The chaos of survival. Admiral Cole, she spoke into her communicator. Status report. The admiral's voice came back tired but triumphant. The fleet is broken, Governor. We captured their war leader and destroyed most of their ships. The threat is over, and we could not have done it without the... Santos looked up at the sky again. Somewhere up there, 300 alien warships had appeared from nowhere to save her world. She still did not understand why. The commander wishes to meet with you. Admiral Cole continued. She is requesting permission to land on New Hartford. Permission granted. Tell her she is welcome here. Tell her we owe her everything. An hour later, a shuttle descended through the atmosphere and landed in the central plaza. The crowd gathered to watch with wonder and gratitude. The hatch opened, and stepped out into the sunlight of a human world. She was tall and graceful with pale blue skin and eyes that held the wisdom of a civilization far older than humanity. She wore the formal robes of an advisor. Governor Santos walked forward to meet her. I am Governor Santos. On behalf of New Hartford and all of humanity, I thank you. You saved our lives today. We will never forget what you have done. Bowed her head in respect. Governor, I am honored to meet you, but I am not the one you should thank. I am only the messenger, the answer to a debt that was owed. Santos looked confused. I do not understand. We have no treaty with your people, no alliance. Why did you come? I smiled softly. Because 3 years ago a human saved my life. He found me stranded and dying, and he helped me without asking for anything in return. He gave me his food and his resources and his time. When I asked him why, he simply said that I needed help and he was there. She looked out at the gathered crowd. That human taught me something about your species. You help others not because you expect reward, but because it is right. You show kindness to strangers. You sacrifice for those you do not know. These are rare qualities in the galaxy, qualities worth protecting. Governor Santos felt tears forming in her eyes. Who was this human? What is his name? His name is Daniel Perry. He was a cargo pilot. I do not know where he is now, but I have spent 3 years remembering what he did for me. Today my people answered his kindness with our own. Santos turned to her aide. Find him, search every record. I want Daniel Perry found and brought here. It took 2 hours. Daniel Perry was not hard to find. He had retired from cargo hauling the year before and now worked as a mechanic at a small repair shop on the outskirts of the capital. He lived in a modest apartment and spent his evenings reading books and watching the stars. He was brought to the plaza in a state of complete confusion. Officials had knocked on his door and told him the governor wanted to see him. He had no idea why. When he arrived at the plaza, he saw the crowd, and the shuttle and the governor standing with an alien woman in formal robes. He felt very out of place in his work clothes with grease still on his hands. Governor Santos approached him with a warm smile. Daniel Perry, thank you for coming. Daniel shifted nervously. I am not sure why I am here, ma'am. I am just a mechanic. I have not done anything important. A step forward, Daniel looked at her and frowned. There was something familiar about her face, but he could not place it. You do not remember me, she said gently. Daniel studied her features, blue skin, deep blue eyes, a voice like crystal chimes, and then it clicked. The mining station, the damaged shuttle, the young woman he had saved so many years ago. You, he breathed. You are the one I found at the station. I never knew what happened to you. A nodded. I went home, Daniel Perry, and I never forgot you. I never forgot what you did for me. Today, I convinced my people to send their entire fleet to save humanity. 300 warships came to your defense because of what you taught me about kindness. Daniel stared at her. He could not process what she was saying. I do not understand. I just fixed your shuttle. I shared some food. It was not anything special. A reached out and took his hands in hers, the same gesture she had made 3 years ago. That is exactly why it was special, Daniel. You did not think you were doing anything remarkable. You simply helped someone who needed help. That is the most human thing there is. And that simple act created ripples that saved millions of lives today. Daniel looked around at the crowd. People were watching him with tears in their eyes. Governor Santos was smiling. Admiral Cole had arrived and was standing at attention in salute. He was just a cargo pilot, just a mechanic. He had never thought of himself as anyone important, but somehow his simple act of kindness had changed everything. I did not know, he said quietly. I did not know any of this would happen. A smiled. That is the nature of kindness, Daniel. We never know how far it will reach. We never know whose life we will change. We simply do what is right and trust that the universe will remember. In the weeks that followed, a formal alliance was signed between Earth and the Confederation. High Counselor traveled to human space for the ceremony. He met Daniel Perry and shook his hand and thanked him for showing his people what true honor looked like. A monument was erected in the central plaza of New Hartford. It showed a human hand reaching out to help another. The inscription at the base was simple. Once a human helped, an entire fleet answered. Daniel Perry did not want fame or recognition. He returned to his quiet life and his small apartment and his books about the stars. But sometimes visitors came to see him, humans and alike. They wanted to meet the man whose kindness had saved 2 civilizations. He always told them the same thing. I just did what anyone would do. I saw someone who needed help and I helped them. That is all. And who visited him every year on the anniversary of their first meeting would always smile and say the same thing in return. That is exactly what makes humans remarkable, Daniel. You help without thinking. You give without counting. You love without limits. The galaxy needs more of that. The galaxy needs more humans. Daniel would laugh and pour her a cup of tea, and they would sit together and talk about the old days. Two friends from different worlds brought together by a simple act of kindness. And somewhere out among the stars, new stories were being written. Stories of humans and working together. Stories of cooperation and understanding between species who had once been strangers. Stories that all began with one man who stopped to help someone in need. That is how history changes, not with great battles or grand speeches, but with small moments of compassion that ripple outward forever. Once a human was helped, then an entire fleet came to answer. And the galaxy was never the same.